Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 10th of May, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So another glorious day in Ethereum staking land. So today marks the day that we have more validators active on the network than were active before withdrawals were enabled. So I put out a tweet and I said exactly that, and it took less than a month for this to happen, and ETH staking is up only. Now, what I mean by this is basically before we had Chapala go live, you can actually see the amount of validators that were active on the network, which had peaked at around, here we go, about, it's just before, April 9th. It peaked at 563,803 validators. Then validators started exiting. Before withdrawals were enabled, they could exit early. Obviously, we saw Kraken and a bunch of other people doing this. And then since then, obviously, the net validators have gone down a bit, but we're going back up. And now, as of today, we are higher than what we were back then. So yeah, it took around a month, I think, or less than a month from withdrawals, but a month from when it started going down here for the active validators to be higher than they were pre-withdrawals. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to really anyone that was paying attention and that knows that ETH staking really is generally up only. There are so many amazing reasons to stake ETH. I mean, just like if you're just a profit maxi, looking at the APR that you can get on ETH right now is kind of crazy, right? So there are obviously a lot of other reasons on top of that as well. Now, I had some comments around this tweet. Someone commented saying, you know, ETH staking is up only until there is like a staking cap put in place. I've spoken about this concept of a staking cap before, basically capping the amount of validators that could be active on the network at any given time. Now, from the proposals I've seen, if this was implemented, it wouldn't be a hard cap, it would be a soft cap. So what would happen is that you would have, like, for example, let's say the total amount of ETH staked on the network is 60 million, and then there was only 30 million ETH staked that was kind of actively staked at any given time. So you would have 30 million staked that was dormant, right, and 30 million stake that was active. And the network would handle this by doing a kind of like round robin thing where it essentially goes through all the validators and they're active at various different times, and then the APR would just kind of even out over time to the same across all validators. But there would only be 30 million ETH worth of validators active at any given time. It doesn't, you know, and I should say, if we're talking about time here, it's more active attesting to and proposing any given blocks, right? So that's the proposals I've seen. There are a few still floating around, and I remember I shared a post from Vitalik quite a while ago covering this, but as far as I know, there is no kind of, I guess, decision being made yet on which proposal seems to be the best and which one actually makes sense when you consider all the trade-offs. But I would imagine that there's going to be a validator cap put in place one day, but it will not cap the total amount of ETH staked. From what I've seen, it will just cap the active amount of ETH staked from a technical point of view there. So ETH staking generally is up only. But I've also discussed in the past that I don't think that we're going to get, like most of the ETH supply staked. Like some networks have 70%, 80% of their native token staked. And that's because they're a mixture of a delegated proof of stake network. Their native token doesn't really have any demand outside of staking it. And if you're not staking it, you're getting kind of inflated away by the issuance of the network here. Whereas ETH as an asset has many, many use cases beyond just being used to stake. Now, in saying that, obviously with the rise of the LSTs, the liquid staking tokens, and also the coming rise and the coming, I guess, like a wave of restaking protocols, that's going to change the calculus a bit, where people are going to be like, okay, well, if I've just got this vanilla ETH here, but it's kind of useless because I could stake it, get an LST, and then I could like restake it and get kind of an LST on top of that, and then I can go use it in DeFi, and then I can get leverage and all this other crazy stuff that can go on to boost your yield and be able to kind of like unlock that liquidity. I think that'll be a big boost to the amount of ETH staked. But to get to 70% of the total ETH staked on the network, I think it would be like, 80, 90 million ETH staked? We're at 18 million right now. So it's a pretty tough ask. I don't know. I don't think that we're going to get there anytime soon, if ever really. And I'm talking total stake, even with a validator cap in place. I'm still talking total stake, not just the active stake. So yeah, looking at it from that perspective, it's kind of hard to know, but I don't see any reason for there to be 80, 90 million ETH staked. And the funny thing is about ETH as an asset as well, is that it is deflationary, at least right now, and it has been for quite a while actually, which I'm going to talk about a little bit at the end of the episode today. I've got the Ultrasound Money website up here, but essentially that percentage of ETH staked changes, right, over time, because let's say for some reason in 10 years, we've burnt 20 million ETH, or sorry, we have changed the supply of ETH by 20 million. So instead of ETH supply being 120 million, it is now 100 million. Well, I mean, the percentages very quickly change from there. Like if we have 50 million ETH staked, that would be 50% of the ETH at 100 million ETH, whereas at 120 million, it would be less than that, obviously. So there is a different calculus there as well. So as I said, a lot of kind of, I guess, like guesses being made here, a lot of assumptions being made here. But I think that we can all safely say, at least at this point in time, that the amount of ETH that's going into the deposit contract that's ending up on the Beacon chain as part of a validator, aka being staked, is going to be up only for the foreseeable future. So great to see that. Great to see that all the FUD has kind of been more than dispelled at this point around withdrawals. It's kind of been obliterated. All the FUD that you ever heard, like no one's said anything since then. I think all the people that were spreading that FUD have kind of crawled back into their hole or kind of admitted they were wrong, which I guess like, you can't really not do that if you want to keep your, I guess, some reputation intact. But yeah, just great to see that and figured I'd point it out for you guys. Now, moving on, a couple more things about staking. So Jasper from the Rocket Pool community has shared that you will soon be able to use Rocket Pool with Ledger to stake ETH for ETH and more. So you can see here there's a GitHub a kind of repository here for the Ledger app Rocket Pool plugin, which is very cool to see. So yeah, people that have a Ledger app and want to stake their ETH can now, well, will be able to soon do so through the Rocket Pool protocol. And this might not seem like a big deal to people who maybe are more kind of crypto native, on-chain native, and maybe don't use the Ledger app itself, but there are plenty of people out there, especially I guess, people who don't really do anything on chain, who just store their crypto on a Ledger device. That's the most they'll do, right? They'll move their crypto from an exchange to their Ledger device, or they'll move it from their MetaMask hot wallet to a Ledger device or something like that, right? So those people use the Ledger app, and then in that Ledger app, they're actually able to stake their ETH via, I believe Lido is supported right now, but in the future, and I don't know who else is supported. I think it's Lido. It might not even be Lido. I can't remember, but they do support, I think, one or two other services. But soon they'll be supporting Rocket Pool, which is obviously a huge boon for Rocket Pool, because there are plenty of Ledger app users out there, and they are probably not users that the Rocket Pool protocol has traditionally been exposed to, which is obviously going to be great for Rocket Pool's growth here. So yeah, can't wait to see Rocket Pool's growth continue and hopefully be up only into the future as well. All right, Obol Labs has announced that Lodestar has become the first validator client to support aggregation duties with DVT, or distributed validator technology. This was one of the final missing technical pieces and now allows distributed validators to be fully duty complete. So you can check out this post here, Obol DVT in a nutshell, talking about everything that you need to know about that, as well as a client support checklist here for CL and VC combinations, or consensus layer and validator client combinations, success duties observed on the public testnet, and a few more things here, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But great to see more clients supporting distributed validator technology here. This is exactly what we want to be seeing. At the end of the day, DVT is going to play a big role going forward in Ethereum staking. You guys know that I run an Obol DVT validator or service on my solo staking box. I talked about that the other week and how that's just been a very smooth experience. Minimal maintenance, if any, really. I mean, there obviously are going to be updates sometimes for the Obol software, so I just update them as they come, but generally it just runs in the background like normal validators do, and I'm able to validate with 3 other people from around the world. So 4 of us running a DVT or distributed validator client, I should say, which is obviously very cool for a number of different reasons: security, resiliency, decentralization, all that good stuff there. What I'm most excited about with regards to DVT, and I've spoken about this before, is the I guess bigger players like centralized exchanges embracing DVT and one day allowing for non-custodial staking. So as I've said, I've talked about this before, but just to refresh your memory here, essentially what that would mean if set up correctly and if the exchange supported it, it would mean that people would be able to stake with Coinbase, for example, without having to give Coinbase custody of their ETH. They would basically delegate their ETH, I guess not literally delegate it, but for all intents and purposes, delegate it to Coinbase, and Coinbase would run the validator software for them, but they would never take custody of that ETH. They would just run the validator for those people. So those kind of use cases, I think, are huge for obviously the decentralization and health of the Ethereum network, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing those go live, hopefully at some point in the future. Now, of course, these bigger staking operations are going to move a lot slower than the smaller ones. It's probably going to take them a while to, trust the I guess like code here for Obol and other providers, but also just kind of integrate it within their stack because they're bigger players. They take a while to move here. But yeah, you can go read more about Obol. I'll link this in the YouTube description below. All right, last up here was something about staking, was something from Superfizz. So he shared an EIP that I think Danny Ryan published here, and he said, "This is very exciting, and I desperately hope it enables tooling to allow small staking providers and DVT to further decentralize the Beacon chain." So this EIP, he's going to be adding execution layer triggerable exits, and Danny describes this as adding a cross-layer method to trigger validator exits from the execution layer. And note the consensus layer spec is just a sketch and will be implemented on the consensus layer specs repo soon. And then Micho here says, "This is massive for liquid staking protocols and DVT setups. This EIP would allow to manage risk much better for scenarios like loss of private keys or scenarios where DVT validators have lost connectivity to a majority of their key shares, which could occur if there's mass censorship or downtime in a popular AWS region, for example." And then he continues by saying, "I agree with Danny that no solution I've heard of relies on this not being possible, and that a smart contract is an elegant workaround for any cases which might." So yeah, you can read a full breakdown of what this entails here on the GitHub repo itself, or the GitHub issue, I should say itself, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to do. But yeah, this is super exciting. I mean, I've got to read more about this and understand how it actually works under the hood. But essentially, what I believe it would do for the, as Mitchell describes here for DVT, is be able to manage these kind of, I guess, like maybe edge cases, because these things aren't expected to happen most of the time, but when they do happen, you want to have a way of recovering from this issue. So something like a loss of a private key, right? Or something that's a real kind of, I guess, like worst case scenario is if there's mass censorship happening on an AWS region. So for example, let's say a lot of the DVT clusters are running on AWS West or something like that, right? In the US there. So let's say that Amazon decides, okay, well, we're going to censor all of these kind of Ethereum-related infrastructure on AWS, and then we're not going to give our customers the ability to run this stuff on AWS, I should say, sorry, and that could lead to slashing events and other such events like that. So yeah, those kind of worst case scenarios and edge cases would be addressed by this, which is obviously very, very cool. And that's the kind of stuff that I think ETH researchers and developers really think about, is those worst case scenarios. Because as I said, it's all well and good in the normal case where everything's running fine and everyone expects things to keep running fine, but generally I think that when thinking about it, you have to think about worst case scenario things, even though and I highlighted this I think a few weeks ago, that the total amount of validators that have been actually slashed on the Ethereum network is very, very small. It's like, I think it's like a few hundred or something out of the hundreds of thousands that we have, and a lot of them were slashed on accident because they didn't they accidentally double signed because they had like a redundant setup that kicked in when it shouldn't have. And there hasn't actually been, I believe, I don't know if there has been any malicious attacks on the network yet that have been slashed, like actually provably malicious. I think there might have been one instance of it, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. I think that's a principle for a lot of things in life, but especially when it comes to building and maintaining the security of economic networks like Ethereum, decentralized economic networks especially as well. But yeah, you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Polynya had a great quote tweet thread about Arbitrum's announcements here. So I'll go over Arbitrum's announcement first and then describe and then read out Polynya's thread. So Arbitrum announced that they are the only rollup that sends all surplus revenue generated by transaction fees to their respective DAO, and it is time for the DAO to collect the funds so far. So this is basically Arbitrum announcing the fees that were in excess of what they needed to pay for L1 fees going to the DAO, and Polynya broke this down and basically said that Arbitrum DAO net earned about $6 million worth of ETH, and cost of operation was about $11 million. So, and then Polynya continues by saying, here's a trick for L2 serious about challenging Arbitrum's dominance, and then has a thread around how essentially Arbitrum could fund themselves or fund Arbitrum 1 with just a moderate or I guess like a very low ARB inflation of 1 to 2%, which is a fraction of most L1s, of course, and that would actually be able that would actually enable Arbitrum 1 to make end user fees be zero, right? Now, of course, there's things like cyberbullying and filtering out what's actually spam and what should be reimbursed, stuff like that, but that's the reality of how economically I guess like efficient L2s are. Besides, L2s are compared to L1s here. And then Polynya continues basically by saying, you can undercut Arbitrum here by doing this on your own rollup with your own token, which obviously relies on liquidity for the token, but still, I mean, it is a path here. And also, Polynya brought up that this is a temporary measure until EIP 4844, which they suspect 0.2% or some negligible inflation will be enough to send user fees to near zero. L2 economics are just too good here. And they really are. I mean, as Polynya mentions here, I know I keep going back and forth between Polynya and Polynya. I don't know why my brain is doing that lately, but it is what it is. Anyway, I know some of you have noticed that, so I'm just gonna say that there. But the point of why I'm highlighting this thread here is really that kind of sentence that they said, where they said L2 economics are just too good, and this is because the L2 does not have to worry about funding its own security and consensus and decentralization, because it gets that from Ethereum layer 1. And this is really the superpower of L2s, because you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. You just have to settle down to Ethereum, and doing that is a lot cheaper even before 4844 goes live than starting a new L1, because at the end of the day, when you start a new L1, your token is what pays for the maintenance and security and upkeep of the network. And this should be obvious to everyone at this point, but just to kind of explain what I mean by that, the tokens are, let's take Ethereum proof of work and Ethereum proof of stake, for example. What do you think the miners were getting paid with in order to cover their electricity bills, right? That they were getting paid with ETH. And they were selling ETH to cover their electricity bills and other bills, and that was securing the network, right? And as the ETH price went up, the hash rate followed, and obviously, more hash rate doesn't equal more security, but the more kind of like activity you have on the network, the more the price goes up, the more hash rate and the more miners that come on the network, the potentially more secure it can be. It's not an exact science, but that's the general gist of it there. And then with proof of stake, it's the same thing. We pay ETH stakers in ETH, right? And we pay them a percentage in ETH in order to want to stake their ETH and have validators and propose blocks and attest to blocks and all that sort of stuff there. So they're basically putting their ETH at risk. So it's an incentive mechanism, right? But in order to fund that security, the people getting those rewards have to sell. And this is an even worse case for the monolithic chains, where the hardware costs are so high, even if they're proof of stake, that they have to sell a lot of the token in order to fund the fund the chain, fund the upkeep of the chain. And this is especially true for the ultra low fee chains, because the only revenue that the validators are really making is from the issuance, right? From the token issuance, from the token inflation. They've got no fees to sell, so they have to sell the token inflation, which just puts downward pressure on the price. So essentially what ends up happening is that the holders of the token are the ones paying for those cheap fees. So if you are holding a token and you bought it at $10 and you're thinking, wow, okay, this is really bullish, I'm really bullish in this platform, and this platform it has really cheap fees and maybe it gets some usage and the fees still kind of cheap there and everything like that. But then the token goes down to $5 because everyone's selling the token in order to, all the validators are selling the token in order to cover their costs. Well, the cheap fees were paid for by that, right? So there's no free lunch here is what I'm basically saying, but it's all about making it as economically efficient as possible. And that's what Ethereum L1 has done with its economic policy of minimum viable issuance, which includes EIP 1559. And it's also what Ethereum has done with its rollup centric roadmap, where the L2s get to inherit this without having to pay for it themselves to the same extent. Because all they have to do is pay the normal user fees, and then with 4844, those fees are going to be much, much cheaper, and they still get to inherit that consensus, that decentralization, and that security from Ethereum L1. So it just is a really beautifully economically sustainable system, which I think is something that a lot of people miss when they discuss the trade-offs between L2, the modular roadmap and the monolithic roadmap, is that economic sustainability. Because at the end of the day, what brings the most attention, I believe, to your network and what allows you to gather such a missionary-driven community is a token, right, that is tied to that network. Obviously, in Ethereum's case, it's ETH, that doesn't just go down only, because that's not going to create any missionaries. That's just going to create bag holders. And bag holders don't stick around forever. They'll cut their losses and move on. Whereas with ETH, right, there are so many reasons to be bullish on it. ETH has, I mean, obviously it's not at all-time highs now, but it has been a very nice thing to hold over longer periods of time. So that brings with it a lot of confidence, and that brings with it adoption and all that other stuff that I spoke about yesterday when it comes to speculation, which I think is something that the people that are heavy on the technical side miss. The economic sustainability is at the heart of what makes blockchains tick, and it's at the heart of what makes the Ethereum rollup-centric roadmap so appealing to, not just developers, but also, I believe, users as well as time goes on. So anyway, you can read Polynya's thread for yourself, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to do. All right, speaking of layer 2s, Aztec has a tweet thread out today where they said, decentralizing Ethereum rollups is one of the biggest open questions right now in the development of layer 2s. Without it, Ethereum scaling will be no better than sidechains. That's why we're issuing an open request for proposals for our decentralized sequencer design. So basically, they've got a thread here talking about how they obviously want to get proposals in for designing a decentralized sequencer for the Aztec network, and they also link to a Discourse forum post here, which of course will be linked in the YouTube description below, about how they're thinking about this and the feedback that they're looking for. There's a lot of information here, actually. It's actually pretty cool. And there's a lot of, there's a few replies here, I should say, from people so far talking about this. And if you want to jump in, you can as well. But it's really, really positive to see so many of these layer 2s and rollups already looking very seriously at decentralizing their sequences, because that really is the end game for a lot of them, right? Decentralizing out the sequencer, taking those training wheels off, getting rid of the admin and multi-sig keys and all that stuff there, so they can actually become true rollups on Ethereum. Now, there was a Vitalik post quite a while ago about rollup decentralization and the different stages that they can actually, the different milestones or stages that they can hit. I think Arbitrum 1 is the furthest along so far in terms of the economically relevant rollups. There are other rollups out there like Fuel V1 that are pretty much the only true decentralized rollups without admin keys and stuff like that on them, but no one's using it. There's no apps there. There's no economic activity. So I guess it's kind of pointless. I mean, it's cool from a proof of concept point of view, but it's kind of pointless from every other point of view. Whereas with Arbitrum 1, it is the biggest rollup. It has the most economic activity, and it is growing all the time. It has a token and a DAO now, and they're well on their way to becoming that truly visionary, I guess that true vision of a decentralized rollup on Ethereum. So they're not the only ones, as I said. Everyone's pretty much looking at this now, and Aztec is as well, of course. So I'll link this forum post in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, moving on to some, I don't think this is misinformation or FUD or anything, but moving on to some misconceptions that I've been seeing floating around on Twitter lately around the ETH burn and supply change. So you may see this screenshot posted around on Twitter, which is a screenshot that comes from the Ultrasound Money website, where at the top of the page here, you can see the supply change number. Now, right now, since the merge, the supply change number is negative 205,000 ETH. Now, this number is not the total ETH burned since the merge. That's exactly the misconception that I've seen on Twitter, is that people are taking this number and saying, oh my God, look, 200,000 ETH burned since the merge. No, no, no. It's much more bullish than that, right? That is the net supply change since the merge. So if you look over to your right-hand side here on the Ultrasound Money website, you can see a little water droplet emoji next to the number 418,000. Now, this is the total ETH issued since the merge, right? New ETH issued from the beacon chain to validators since the merge. Then underneath that, there is a fire emoji, and the number next to that is 624,000 since the merge. Now, when you take the number of ETH burned away from the number of ETH issued since the merge, that's where you get this 205,000 or negative 205,000 number of the supply change. So that should explain it, and it should be pretty clear of why the supply change number is not the ETH burn number. It is the net supply change from the merge, or from whichever time frame you choose here. You can go as far back as all time, or you can go 5 minutes or 1 hour, 1 day, 7 days, right? But the supply change number is always the net issuance, right? The net issuance number since that time frame that you've selected, whereas the on the right-hand side, you've got the total ETH issued in the water droplet and the total ETH burned with the burn emoji, with the fire emoji, and then you just subtract the fire emoji number from the issuance number to get that supply change number here. So hopefully that spells it out for you. Now, if you scroll down and you go to this little table here, underneath the burn heading, this is where you can see all the relevant metrics around the burn. So I've selected here since the merge, a little panda emoji. You can see 624,000 ETH has been burned since the merge. You can see what the issuance offset is, the burn rate per minute, what the burn leaderboard is. Obviously, our fan favorites there like Uniswap and stablecoins and OpenSea and all that stuff there. And then scroll down more, you can see burn records, burn categories, and then there's more information on here. I mean, the Ultrasound Money website is my Bible. You guys know I love this website. If you can understand this website at a deep level and understand what it means for Ethereum and ETH, it's like reading the Matrix code. I like using that analogy because I really think it is like that to an extent. But yeah, just wanted to clear up that bit of... as I said, it's not misinformation, it's a misconceptions that I've been seeing around this screenshot here. But you can check out my tweet about this if you want to just have another explanation of it and read through some of the replies to that. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But you can check out the ultrasound.money website as well to get a full, breakdown of everything there. Now, also, actually, while I'm here, I may as well shout this out. There is a 1559 NFT, I believe, that you can claim, or pop-up that you can claim, and I believe there's still a few that haven't been claimed yet. So you might be eligible for it. You can go check it out on the Ultrasound Money website, I believe. I think there's only like 10 or something left that haven't been claimed yet, but just wanted to give a reminder there for people who may be eligible. So you can go check that out. But on that note, that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.